The drug trial that nearly killed everyone in the room. In March 2006, 8 healthy young men walked into a London hospital to take part in a clinical drug trial. They were not sick. They were not patients. They were volunteers. Each of them had been promised a payment of £2,000 to test a new experimental drug that scientists believed could revolutionize the treatment of diseases such as cancer, arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. Within 1 hour of receiving the drug, the volunteers began screaming in pain. Their bodies started to shut down. Faces swelled beyond recognition. Organs began to fail. Some of them believed they were going to die. Doctors inside the hospital were suddenly facing one of the worst clinical trial disasters in modern medical history. This is the story of the TGN-1412 drug trial catastrophe. The drug at the center of the trial was called TGN-1412. It had been developed by a German biotechnology company called TeGenero. Scientists hoped the drug could activate certain immune cells known as T cells, helping the body fight serious diseases such as cancer and autoimmune disorders. Before the trial, the drug had already been tested on animals. In monkeys, it appeared to be safe. No serious side effects had been reported. Because of these results, regulators approved the next step, the first human trial. This type of trial is called a Phase 1 clinical trial, where a drug is tested on a small group of healthy volunteers to evaluate safety. The study was carried out at Northwick Park Hospital in London. 8 volunteers were recruited. 6 would receive the experimental drug, 2 would receive a placebo. None of them knew what would happen next. On the morning of March 13, 2006, the volunteers arrived at the hospital. Most of them were young men in their 20s and 30s. Some were students. Some were looking for extra money. Clinical trials often attract volunteers like this because the payments can be appealing. At first, everything seemed routine. Doctors explained the procedure. Each volunteer was connected to monitoring equipment. Then, one by one, the 6 participants received the drug through an intravenous infusion. The doses were administered only minutes apart. At that moment, nobody inside the room realized they had just made a critical mistake, because within minutes, the first symptoms began. The drug triggered something known as a cytokine storm. This happens when the immune system suddenly releases massive amounts of inflammatory chemicals. Instead of protecting the body, the immune system begins attacking it. Within an hour, the volunteers became violently ill. They experienced severe headaches, high fever, intense pain, rapid swelling of the face and neck. One volunteer later described feeling as if his head was about to explode. Another said his skin turned bright red and his body began burning with heat. Doctors quickly realized the situation was becoming catastrophic, but the reaction continued to worsen. Several volunteers began to suffer multiple organ failure. Within hours, all 6 men were transferred to the intensive care unit. Some were placed on life support machines. For a moment, doctors feared that none of them would survive. Miraculously, all 6 volunteers eventually survived, but the damage was severe. Some suffered long-term immune system problems. Others experienced psychological trauma from the experience. One volunteer later said he felt like he had been part of a medical experiment gone horribly wrong. The incident quickly made international headlines. The trial was immediately suspended. TeGenero, the company that developed the drug, soon declared bankruptcy. Investigators began asking an important question. How could this happen if the drug had appeared safe in animal tests? Experts later discovered several problems with the trial design. First, the drug activated human immune cells in a way that animal tests had failed to predict. Second, the volunteers were dosed too close together in time. This meant doctors had no opportunity to see the reaction in the first participant before giving the drug to the others. If the doses had been spaced several hours apart, the disaster might have been prevented. Regulators later concluded that the trial followed the rules that existed at the time, but those rules were clearly not enough. The TGN-1412 disaster forced regulators around the world to rethink how new medicines are tested. After the incident, new guidelines were introduced. For high-risk drugs, volunteers must now be dosed one at a time. Longer observation periods are required between doses. Much lower starting doses are recommended. These changes were designed to prevent another catastrophe like the one that occurred in London. Today, the TGN-1412 trial is still studied in medical schools as a warning about the risks of experimental drugs.